All right. Welcome, everyone. We have a very special guest with us today. First of all, I'll introduce myself. I'm Cliff White from Strong Machine Adventure Racing, and we host these very occasional webinar slash video meetups with all sorts of fun people from the adventure racing community, and trying to allow people from the Strong Machine AR Club and the wider adventure racing community, both in the US and internationally, to join us for a conversation about whatever it is that happens to be in my head at the moment. And for the past several months, I've been thinking about competitiveness in adventure racing, and been talking with Mike for many years, through his connection with adventure racing, now with his company Out There USA, and prior to that, through his incredible history in the sport, as one of the all-time best adventure racers out there, and multiple-time world champion, Primal Quest, Eco Challenge, you name it, he's been there and won it, and still an essential part of our sport, as one of the a big sponsor of the main summer adventure race with Out There, but also his involvement in the Adventure Racing World Series as an advisor, and with USARA, and just a real passionate person about the sport, even in semi-retirement, though. Raced an Eco Challenge in Fiji, and we'll see if we can convince him to do another couple races here on the in the next hour. But yeah, just super thrilled and excited to have Mike to talk about competitiveness, and we've got some time at the end of the proposed questions I have here, for audience questions. So if any of you who've joined us tonight want to ask Mike a question, we'll get to that. And if you have any questions while we're going through, you can type them to me, and I'll get to them if they're on topic, and otherwise we'll kind of wait till the end to go to the potpourri questions for Mike. But yeah, like I said, Mike has been supportive of the main summer adventure race, getting us his awesome packs and buffs, and a bunch of other really cool gear that his company makes specifically for adventure racing. You can use it for other stuff too, of course, but it's really technically designed for adventure racing through Out There. And he also does some really cool bike tours. So I guess I just wanted to start with that, first of all, to just see what's new at Out There, and what you're working on, what you've got available for purchase. And then we can talk a little bit about your bike touring as well.
Absolutely. And
Welcome.
hey, thank you. I appreciate the invitation. I'm excited to share some of my experience and stories with those on board here this evening. So thank you for the invitation. Although I have to say, I had never participated in a webinar before, so I kind of assumed it was what it is, but hadn't really understood it. So now I will experience it. So
It's a
um,
pretty
I'll,
casual webinar here.
yeah, I will touch on what you just had mentioned about our bike tours and my gear or products that I'm selling. I'll start with the products. So right now I do have uh, the 30-liter pack and the 15-liter pack hanging behind me here. They're my two primary pack sales items or products right now. I also have the 45-liter, the hip packs, and I'm working on some pretty cool stuff with a sprint model, or about a 10-liter expandable pack. Right now, I've been actually testing various versions of that for the last 4 or 5 years. COVID kind of put a little stall on things, but anyway, I've been, you know, quite busy with all the different things going on in my life, including our bike tours and such. So I've been pretty, what you might say, um, just really kind of wanting to make sure I get everything right with this pack, and then that's going to carry over into the rest of the line and some new items. But I don't want to rush into things, but I do want to get it out there on the market because I know there's definitely um, a need for it, or I think there is anyway, and I think I can fill some of the gaps what other companies are doing right now, and it'll be a pretty versatile pack, that sprint pack, which is kind of right up the market lane for cycling or mountain biking, more in particular, I guess you might say, and then little short day hikes. And I use it for travel and other adventures as well. I literally got back about 2 weeks ago from a trip in Japan with my daughter Heidi, and I was using that pack as my primary pack, actually, with all the avalanche gear and some clothing and so forth. So it's quite versatile, and it's a bit smaller than 15-liter back there in different ways, but more, I think, more versatile, more modular as well. So kind of excited about that. I've got some new hydration flask and reservoirs we've got now for sale. I need to get some of the images up with the hydration soft flask. Worked on testing out a lot of different variations of the model I ended up with. I think it's going to be a very suitable, great little product, that soft flask, and the new hydration reservoir as well, with the full opening end on it, as well as different shut off nozzle and things of that nature. So pretty excited about those little things, but they all add up, right? And
Definitely.
then
Yeah. We've used
with
them
our
all.
bike tours, yeah, good. Love to hear that. Love to hear that. Another product I will just so quick plug to, which I'm, honestly a huge believer in, is the Xenix water drops. We've used these things. I think back, it's almost 20 years or maybe more. I think back in 2002 we started using these drops in Nepal, and they're amazing, honestly. So if anybody's questioning whether to, what to use and whether to use these, I think the product speaks for itself, and the reputation of the product with us. Honestly, I can't think of any of my team members who've gotten sick from drinking water once we've treated them with these drops. So pretty
Yeah.
amazing product. But
Xinix is Xinix, correct?
that's correct.
Yeah.
Yes,
And
and they're on our website under accessories.
a lot of the top adventure racing teams in the world use this. It's a treatment for water, and with adventure racing kind of relying on water you can find on course. Xinix is really a necessary tool for any adventure racer as a purification technique for some maybe questionable water sources you might find on course. So it's quick and it works, right?
Yeah, I'll add to that quickly. One of a couple of the attributes with the Xenix product is, one, you basically tasteless unless you poured a whole bottle, 10 milliliter bottle into a bicycle sized bottle, 22 ounces or so. You wouldn't taste it. They are super effective, super quick. When it comes to the treatment, you literally pour in half a dozen drops into a 500 milliliter or a 22-ounce bottle, and then shake it up, and you can drink it pretty much straight away. Depending upon how contaminated the water might be, give it a little more time, but they always recommend like 5 minutes or so, just because they want to make sure people aren't, getting too hasty and end up sick because of the rush to get drinking the water and moving on. So the other thing is, it's just such a simple small bottle, about the size of a lipstick container, that that they come in, and you just shake out the drops out of the top. And they're actually working on a new bottle, which is going to increase the longevity of it. It's a plastic bottle. I think it's going to be about double the size. So anyway, it's something we've used for a long time, and all these attributes add up, and it's kind of a no-brainer for us.
Cool. And you also do bike tours, right?
Yeah, so my wife and I started doing bike tours about half a dozen or so years ago over in Europe, and we've done a couple in the States since, primarily during COVID. We're looking to expand into some other stuff, maybe some backcountry skiing and resort skiing trips in Europe, because we've had a lot of requests for that. Even considering going to Argentina next year or the year after. We've been to Colombia and a number of locations throughout Europe, and they're usually about a week long. Very comparable to a number of the other groups out there for, say, Trek Tours, Divine, Backroads, and so forth. But I think if you talk to our guests, many of them are repeat guests. They just kind of travel along with us to the different locations. They absolutely love it, and I think a big part of that as well is because we kind of what do you call it? The way we select the individuals to go, they seem to be a really good fit, generally speaking.
So fitness wise, what type of people would come on your trip?
A good question. The demographic is really kind of around my age group. Um, I'd say probably between mid 40s to mid 60s is the demographic, and then now with the availability and the functionality of the e-bikes, it's just a game changer. So people, both mountain and road, we're doing some mountain bike trips. We're going to do another one in the Dolomites this summer. It just enables, as one of my good friends who owns a bike shop says, it's not cheating, it's enabling. It enables the user to be able to ride at the pace of maybe somebody who's a stronger rider, or a lot of husband wives, where mostly the wives will ride on it, but there's an occasion where the husband might jump on an e-bike, and that's great. It just kind of evens things out, and they feel much more a part of the whole trip and the experience by being able to not have to worry about, I'm going to be at the back, or I'm going to struggle, or they're going to be waiting for me. It's not that sort of thing. No, it's really a game changer.
Cool. Well, e-bikes are illegal in adventure racing still, but I might need one to keep up with you, unless you're going to run the pace line for us on those bike trips, Mike. I don't know. You were a pretty good
Whenever
biker back in the day,
I did come from one of my shorter careers, or one of my careers in sporting world was mountain bike racing. Yeah, and prior to that was freestyle skiing, so got a bit of history there as well. And then adventure racing popped onto the scene, and it's kind of one thing flowed into the next for me, and now the bike tours. So
yeah.
one day I'll consider retirement for real, but right now it's not on the program.
Yeah. Well, so you started, I mean, that's a pretty modest answer, but you were a world champion mountain bike racer. And then you were very competitive in freestyle ski, mogul skiing, correct? Did you win a world championship in mogul skiing? Or
It was professional sport at the time.
right.
So I don't know that it was legitimately classified as a world championship, or that there were real, what do you want to say, official world championships at the time. So I did win a number of competitions, usually when I wasn't directing the Pro Mogul series that I directed with my wife and a lot of Vail people that I've become great longtime friends with. So I had that kind of hurdle to work around. I couldn't compete in the events and organize
Right.
them if I was the director behind it. So, but
Well, you got
anyway, I had some good successes and enjoyed that time. And then obviously, my daughter Heidi
right.
kind of followed in my footsteps, and she went on to be an Olympian. Attended the Sochi Olympics in 2014.
Yeah. Incredible. Incredible. That's yeah, it was pretty neat to get to watch her in the Olympics. And then you also won world championships in rogating, and did I see winter triathlon or winter biathlon as well? Not
Winter triathlon, I was national champion,
okay.
and rogating, yes, and so long distance orienteering for, most of this crowd will understand or know what rogating is, but if you tell somebody else that's not familiar with the sport, they may think it's something to do with hair products. But anyway, yeah, Michael Tobin and I won the world championships there when it was in Arizona. That was, oh gosh, 15 years ago maybe. And I think they just held one last year in California, if my memory is there correctly on that one. and then obviously had some success in the world championships with adventure racing as well. So
Yeah.
really nice to perform well in the sports you indulge in.
I'm establishing your bona fides here, Mike, as someone who can talk about being competitive, not just in adventure racing, but in a number of different sports, and uh, can really talk about the mentality that it takes to be competitive, or to compete at the highest level of a number of different sports. And so that's really what I wanted to focus this meetup around, was trying to figure out, get into your head a little bit about what it takes to really get to the pointy end on primarily adventure racing, but I think maybe start with the more universal aspect of what makes you tick competitively. Like, how do you get to be world champion in multiple sports? How do you get to the mentality that it takes personally, just you, to get where you have with your athletic career?
That's a good question, and um, I, I suppose the best way I can um, describe it or portray it is when I started in my kind of competitive sports. I suppose go back as far as little league baseball when I was a kid back in the Midwest. I was always trying to or striving to be the best I could. It didn't play out the way I'd hoped at the time, but I had a lot of fun playing baseball and other uh, ball sports at the time. But once I moved out to Colorado, Vail is just such a athletic community, and a lot of running races were going on and mountain bike or bike races. There was no mountain biking at the time, so I just kind of dabbled in those things, and I started to have some good results in the bike or the running first of all, and then it transferred over into biking, and then um, the skiing was something. It was actually the reason I came to Colorado, because I wanted to ski, and obviously there's a bit better opportunity, a bit more opportunity, better terrain to do so here than back in Iowa. Although we did have a ski resort or ski area 5 minutes from my house, but nothing like Vail or Aspen and Utah resorts and so forth that I've skied at. So anyway, I think it really came from early successes in sports, and then getting a taste of that competitive knack to be at the front of a field. And once you start winning at something, you kind of like if I'm good at this sport, you want to win at that as well. And so I think it's a lot to do with the mental state, your drive to do so. And I can kind of flip it over now to where there's a few years ago I would beat athletes or participants half my age in sports that I was competing in, and that was always pretty rewarding. But now it's like, okay, I have to pick and choose how much I beat myself up over a result that's not the first step or top step on the podium per se. I still do compete in things. As a matter of fact, on this weekend we got an uphill event here in Vail, and I've been doing quite a bit of ski randonnée racing here this last year or so. Um, did a lot of that for a while with some of the bigger events in Colorado, like the Elk Mountain Grand Traverse, the Power of Four, Breckenridge Head Five Peaks, things of that nature. So that was kind of a sport I picked up and carried on the competitiveness through those outlets after I pretty much retired from the sport of adventure racing. But going back to the primary point in your question, I think was, what has helped me to achieve these results in these different sports. I think really goes back to getting that winning bug, and then really trying to perform it the best you can. And another thing I always think about is, like, I can go out and train with people doing different sports, right? And it's one thing to train with them, and I always feel like, oh my gosh, these guys are getting stronger and stronger, and then I think once the jury or the bibs put on or the race number is put on, things change in my mind because I don't even think so much about these guys that I train with at similar level that, oftentimes they're, well behind me. I'm looking ahead, the finish line or the first place step on the podium per se. So I think it's really a lot to do with mindset.
What does it take to have that mindset as a just living in the world? I mean, does it take a toll in terms of like, how much of your life do you need to dedicate to being that elite level athlete? It's a more niche sport, but I think any sport these days has any number of people that are good enough at it where you kind of need to dedicate your life to it. What does that actually mean in real life? Like when you were dedicating your life to adventure racing or mountain bike racing, what does that look like? With relationships, with how your day was scheduled, how much did it actually change or shape your day-to-day existence?
It's it's funny. I look back and I think, how did I fit all this in? One sport to another per se. Mountain biking, I was fortunate to really focus on that primarily above anything else other than family and bringing in income in order to support the family. And I suppose that in itself is quite a bit of a driving or forceful factor in how much I focused on the results in these events or these different sports. Um, but it is a huge balance, and I look back and I think, okay, I'm glad I don't have to spend 5 or 6 days a week on the bike with a very dedicated program or focus towards conditioning, right? And trying to peak for various events and so forth. I would say that sport in itself was the most taxing physically and from a commitment perspective as well, where you just had to put in the time and you had to put in the hours suffering. And for me, a lot of it was um, I enjoy racing, and I think that it's hard for anybody to argue with the fact that you can get your best conditioning for various sports, whether it's freestyle skiing or biking or adventure racing, when you're in a competition, because you're gonna find that extra level or that extra step you need to push or strive for because everybody else is trying to do the same thing. So for me, I would say competition is huge in the perspective or the way one might find the conditioning and also skills. How many times can we go out to or look back and think, these mistakes I made or these shortcomings are because maybe I didn't train properly or I wasn't thinking clearly or our team wasn't functioning as efficiently as it could. So but again, circling back a little bit to the question is it's a tough one to balance all those different things. And actually, during my adventure racing years, pretty much for a decade or so, I was working down at Beaver Creek Resort as a director of activities, and so I was putting in an average of probably 30 to 40 hours a week throughout the year. But thankfully, I was able to help cross promote the resort through my racing endeavors, and so they supported me well and gave me a very flexible schedule. But when I wasn't racing or training, I was trying to fit time in with the family and obviously my work obligations.
Did you prefer to race sports that were individual or team? And what's the difference competitively between racing solo sports, individual sports, and team sports?
I enjoyed both. I'll start with that. But honestly, I think on the individual side, you're the only one that's you have to be accountable for, and it works both ways. If you're successful, great. You can look back and say, I did things well or I achieved what I was after. But when you don't, you're the one to blame. It's you can't point fingers elsewhere. And in the adventure racing sport per se, or some of these team events like the Brandon A ski racing where you do team events, or I suppose we did a little in the triathlon world, winter triathlon teams and so forth. But that was, just one of the events during a big weekend of competitions. But the adventure racing side of it, uh, it's a difficult thing to balance the team dynamics. And I think in order to be a successful team, you have to be able to have, or you have to be able to pick good teammates who are talented, or hopefully you're picked as one of these team members on a very strong team. And typically, these strong teams have a lot of Type A personalities. So balance is a big challenge in itself too. With teams, and we went through what was probably 10 or 12 years of adventure racing as a one of the primary or top end teams. And over the course of the years, people would retire or move on or jump over to another team here and there, and we would do the same. But we did end up with a pretty strong core team for the bulk of our years, and we added on different team members throughout the years. And a lot of times we would, somebody might not be able to do a race, and so you had to have some backups. But very fortunate to have strong, talented athletes, and both the male and female side of things for us.
So when it comes to teammates, how do you, when you were picking teammates, because you were kind of leading Nike and that team for a while, what were you looking for in terms of balance? You said there's a lot of Type A personalities at the top end of most fields. With a team of four, and then you probably got some alternates as well that you're looking at to fill out. You were probably racing a lot more back then when you're trying to race professionally. How do you look to fill out a roster when you're actually trying to be competitive as an adventure racing team?
Well, it may start simply by what the type of event is. If it's a sprint race or a 24-hour or a expedition race, and anything in between, per se, we would have again a core team. But going back to selecting that core, you want to pick athletes that have a good background in the disciplines that you're going to be participating in. And that, let's say Michael Tobin, for example, amazing teammate, still one of my best adventure buddies out there, even though we live in different parts of the US. We just spent about a week with him last year out in Sun Valley and had a great time. Then Ian Adamson, of course. I don't want to leave anybody out that's important, but you had Rebecca Rush for, I think I raced with her for a couple events, not just the Regawa in Nepal. Robin Benicasa, of course, Monique Merrill, Danelle Ballingy, and then we had a couple of girls locally. One was Sari Anderson, who we did some of the smaller races with. And then Gretchen Reeves, real close friend of ours. We did the last Eco Challenge with Gretchen. She's amazing. Tough girl. And all these girls, or these ladies that do these sports, it's just hats off to them, because it's next level when you're competing at the high end of or the pointy end of the stick, per se. Everybody's just all out. You're sleep deprived, you're exhausted, and physically have to dig deep to do some of these different activities or disciplines. For say rope climbing, these Jumar sections in Fiji was incredibly brutal, and we had Gretchen for that one, and there's some other gals I'm sure I'm forgetting. And as for men, we had Jay Henry I raced with a bit, Richard Usher out of New Zealand, and then Chris Foran, of course. I mean, who could forget him? And Nathan Fave, we raced one as a team with, I think that was in Spain, where Emma Roca and their team won. I think we ended up second with Nathan and Monique and Chris Foran. One of those events, it was a good battle, but we just didn't put it all together and weren't quite strong enough. And in the end to beat those guys. But yeah, so um, picking the team members had a lot to do with the events and the skill levels or talents of the individuals. But again, most everybody came from either yeah, venture sport background or a multi-sport background, and had some results or accomplishments coming into these events with us.
Mm. It seems like a little bit of a different era in adventure racing now, just without the prize money, without really being able to make a living off of adventure racing. And so I think I wasn't racing or really involved in the adventure racing scene back then, other than as a fan. Um, but it seems like when there's still that level, high caliber level of outdoor athlete. You look at Team Canada and the most recent Eco Challenge, and the obstacle course racers that joined that team and did really well with it. I think there's still that ability to pull in those elite athletes. And I'm hoping we'll see more of that after we've got Arthur the King coming out. Maybe I'm just hopelessly optimistic as an adventure. I think you have to be as an adventure racer, but I hope that will bring some more mainstream attention to the sport. I wanted to take a quick diversion into that movie. It's coming out next month now, which is crazy. But it's based off a world championship in Ecuador in 2014. And Mark
10 years
Wahlberg.
ago now.
Yeah,
Wow.
crazy. And they're having the World Championship in Ecuador this year to celebrate the 10-year anniversary. Of course,
Oh, was
the
it back
movie,
in Ecuador this
it is, yeah. Of course, the movie,
Wow, I
they changed the location to the Dominican Republic, but we'll still be celebrating in Ecuador. The kind of movement that this Arthur story has spawned. Can you talk really quickly about your involvement in that movie and just how out there, because you see all the clips in the movie, you got Mark Wahlberg wearing your out there pack. Can you talk? I'm just curious about how that worked out and how you got involved.
That's pretty cool. I have to say, when you see the actual footage with Mark and his teammates in the other exposure in the transition areas and finish line and so forth along the course, um, super cool. And the way that played out, first and foremost, Michael Lindnord, and I became friends on the racing scene years ago. Um, More just rival friends, but friends. He was looking for a backpack to race with, and he really liked our product. And so we started to support his team, and it was probably for a half a dozen years or so. Um, and of course, they were wearing that pack or our packs during the World Championships in Ecuador. And so when Mark, I believe the way Michael had told me, Mark reached out to Michael to talk about the movie and the real a lot of the details about it. And I think Mark bought into it because of his stature, and I know within the movie industry, and he got somebody to write the script, Hollywood script, based on the true story, and then um, got buy-in from financiers, and I think it was Lionsgate Studios and so forth that got behind it at the time. And he got a hold of Michael to say, "Hey, it's on. Let's get this thing dialed. What is, from your perspective, what do we need to do to make this thing look realistic and be as uh, real to the viewer's eyes as possible?" Now, most of the general public that watches it that haven't adventure raced aren't going to really understand a lot of the little details that Michael brought to it. But that, along with our backpacks, was the footwear, the bicycles, the helmets, the eyewear, clothing. Most everything that they're wearing was stuff that Michael wore, and his team utilized. And so he brought that on board. And Michael actually was there. I don't know if initially he was supposed to work during the whole production of the movie, but he was basically co-directing with Mark Wahlberg throughout the movie. And he was telling me stories about how he would go out and train with the team and the paddling and for say rope skills and things like that, and teach them how it was done in the sport, so that it would look as realistic as they could with Hollywood. And so um, even the part which I wasn't aware of, I don't know if Michael actually mentioned it, but where they almost walk off the cliff that you see in the trailer, well, that's pretty much real. That Michael said, just the other day I was on the phone with him, and he said, yeah, Arthur basically saved my life and our lives at that time. He's nearly stepped off it. So anyway, move fast forward a little bit. So 2 years after the whole production of the movie, it's now being released middle of March. Michael is flying in to California on Saturday to meet up with Mark Wahlberg, with Michael's family, who haven't met Mark yet, and they're going to do some training and whatever Mark does to torture Michael at the time. But anyway, excuse me. Michael's going to go out there, and then he was going to come. I just got a message shortly before we got on the call here. He was going to come out to Colorado and spend 2 weeks out here with his family prior to the movie, after he meets up with Mark this coming weekend. But I guess Lionsgate decided just today that they want Michael to be out in California pretty much throughout the whole lead up to it. So meeting up with Mark this weekend, the following weekend they're doing the movie premiere in Hollywood, or maybe even Catalina Island, because Michael mentioned that might be where they're doing the big release of it. And then he was going to be out here, and then we're actually out there, and number of members of the community, including the local animal shelter and their dog rescue program, the radio station, newspaper, Vail Resorts. We're all putting an effort in, or push in, to help promote the movie and the sport, and obviously our products. And any of the proceeds, whether it's signed books from Michael or our products, backpacks or other gear that we may sell to the moviegoers, the proceeds will go to the local rescue program in the local animal shelter. So we're trying to really help bolster the interest in it locally.
Very cool. And for a little Easter egg for anyone who's joining us live or on the recorded version, USARA is talking with the promotional company for the movie to try and get some special stuff to happen for the adventure racing community. So keep an eye out for that. But I think we're hoping it'll be a good thing for the sport and bring lots of new racers in. The sport has been really fun from an amateur level for a while. There'll always be this grassroots community that we love, and I think we'll try and see how we can grow the sport through this movie. And if any of you guys want to get involved in that, feel free to reach out to me, and we'll try and see what we can do. Kind of just putting together whatever efforts we can now with a month to go before the movie. But I guess we're kind of quickly running out of time here. I wanted to just jump into a few questions that really struck to the core of like what I always wondered about watching you on TV and seeing how you really raced. You always look so fierce, so intense when you were racing. How did that play out in reality, like both with your teammates and with other teams when you were on course? I mean, it's tough because it's a sport that, at times you could be cooperating with other teams. At times you could be racing pretty cutthroat head to head. So how does that work competitively when you're, winning the Adventure Racing World Championship, like with your teammates and then with other teams?
Well, I'd say probably first off, I think the bark was worse than the bite. So I don't think, maybe I portrayed that reputation or image, but I think that was more just trying to focus and put attention or effort into the end goal, the overall result. And so when I would chat a lot of times and at times joke around when we're with other teams, because that was always nice to have another team travel along with you, as long as it was not at a point in the race when it was going to be um, make or break moment, you know. So it was always fun to have those opportunities. But ultimately, I think it was just me being in a leader's role a lot of the time, thinking that, you know what, I need to really kind of keep this team motivated and moving forward and keep the end goal in mind. Not that the athletes and racers or people on our team weren't driven to win as well, but sometimes you do need a little bit of mental um, boost or physical. You know, adventure racing obviously is very physical in the way that we can help each other move along quicker. But I think it's important that you have somebody that can take on that role. A lot of times it may not have been me. It might have been Ian or Michael or Monique, and Monique was quite outspoken a lot of times, where she would literally yell at us to get our asses going and, you know, this sort of stuff. So, but in the end, yeah, there were articles written. I know that I look back at times and people, you know, say I was this intense individual, and maybe I was, and I just didn't realize that. Maybe I was more intense than that. I realized. But again, I can think back for say, we were, quick story, we were in the Balance Bar 24-hour series, and last event of the series out in Malibu, California. And we'd won a number of, let's say there was 10 events. We might have won 6 or 7 of them. I don't know for sure, throughout the season. And this last event, you know, I wanted to win. The team wanted to win. And we were coming, I think we came from behind in the last leg, and we got a little bit of a lead leading into, what is it, in the beach in California, outside of LA. Anyway, we're running into the finish, and you could see the finish line. We saw the team behind us that was chasing us, and it was literally 18 hours into this race, and it's a full-on sprint along the beach in the sand. And I dropped my water bottle when I was handing it to one of the team members for a drink of water or something. And I'm like, oh shit, I gotta stop and grab that because we can get penalized. So I stopped and grabbed it, and I had to run back chasing up to the team members. And I just can't remember exactly if we were chasing the front team or if we were the front team. But anyway, like 10 meters from the finish line, I caught my toe in the sand, trying to sprint forward as fast as I could, and I stumbled. And I was the last member of the team to cross the line, and we ended up second. And I was like, yeah, you know, we lost the battle, but we won the war, you know. And it was, you know, it was decent money on the race day and the overall, but thankfully we still won the overall. But it was one of those things that, as you just hold yourself so accountable, because, you know, it wasn't the team's fault we lost, it was my fault. So um, yeah, competition and the drive to win is big.
That's a rough one. Fortunately, I think you made up for it with some of your other performances. I think they'll forgive a stumble. But so when it comes to the other teams, I mean, sometimes you're on single track. I mean, I remember watching Eco Challenge and seeing you sit on the ropes to not let a team go by. And that's strategy, but it's also like I struggle even as a mid-pack team with where the right line is between camaraderie of being out in this shared experience, you know, out in the middle of nowhere, and you know, you run into a team that is out of water, and it's like, well, that's your own dumb fault for running out of water, but it's also, you know, you want to help them out. Like, what was your perspective on that when you ran into those type of situations or scenarios in your racing career?
I'm sure that, you know, if I thought back, it's a team. It's, excuse me, it's a sport, but in the end, I want to be looked at as a respected competitor. And so, like in the mountain bike world championships, when I won it in '88, Ned Overton talks about how I slowed up as I was passing him on the second to last, or the last big climb, which was the second big climb. and gave him some food. And I think he had water, but I gave him some food or something at the time. Um, and same would go on adventure racing. Like if there was a team that was out of food or out of water, I would call dropping food for a team, because um, you knew they were right behind and you knew they were going to find it. And so you drop some bars or things like that, knowing that they find it, or, just outright share food as we're racing along the teams. So, we weren't going to tow somebody along on the bike with their tow line. Now they may get in draft line with you, but a lot of times it's team strategy as well, especially in shorter races where you might team up with another team to get distance on the other teams behind you, per se. But no, I think myself and our team, we are pretty good, fair sporting competitors. Where we were looking at like, hey, the roles could be reversed, and we could be the one that's in need of. And I know we were at times. I mean, how many races we ran out of food, right? And you're scrounging for food, and you might find another team that's willing to share, per se. So, yeah, that's kind of how I perceive that.
Hmm. And how about with your own teammates? Like, where was the line between, um, you know, strong motivation and feeling like it's not appropriate? Like, how did you? I'm sure I've heard you talk about, finding that common mindset before the race and finding the right teammates and making sure you're all bought into that team vision. But things can go sideways and often do in adventure racing. When things go sideways, to the point where someone's kind of checked out of the competitive mentality, how did you handle those situations?
A lot of time when it was the competitive mentality, it was due to just the general state of health at the time. For say, if somebody had, typical in China, would be traveler's diarrhea or worse. Another would be just physical exhaustion from being trashed in previous disciplines or legs of the race. Uh, on a similar note, just to put a little story behind it, we were racing the Primal Quest in Utah, and it was myself, Michael Tobin, and Steve Gurney, yes, and Danelle Bellingy. Super strong team, and we got out to a pretty significant lead in the latter part of the race. When I say significant, it was a couple hours or more, right? But you never know what's going to happen as the things wind down. You can get, like we did, get held up on the ropes for some reason. I can't remember what that deal was on Bridal Veil Falls, but anyway, we were coming into those ropes for one of the mountain passes, and Danelle was adamant that we needed to go this direction. And she was pretty good with the maps, and she was very strong-willed and very competitive. And the rest of us were like, we see this as being the better choice. And we had to put our foot down and say, look, we don't want to be dictating that it's the guys against the girl, but in this case, it was 3 against 1. Had I been the one person, which I have been, I would have accepted, like, okay, it'll still get us there. I may think it's faster than what they think, but in the end, that was one of those moments I recall definitively that we had to, get a pretty strong um, position, take a pretty strong position to convince Danelle that she needed to come with us and not go that way and meet up, because obviously that's not what you do in adventure racing. So in the end, we won, and she kind of regrouped with us. But it's one of these things that you're going to encounter, whether it's that type of situation or otherwise. A lot of times it's due to fatigue, and then you got to look at it like, well, the best way to move along efficiently is to help those members that are fatigued. And I've been on the receiving end plenty of times, so I know. But whether it's taking some of their gear, making sure they're fed and looking after them, and when you get very depleted and your stomach's a mess, you don't want to eat, but you got to have somebody encouraging you, or whether it's putting somebody in a boat that's stronger because you're weaker than you normally might be. You do whatever it is, towing somebody along on the hike or on a bike. It's part of the sport. And it's a unique part of the sport, which I kind of found I found pretty interesting. And um, very useful when you figure things out, how to be efficient.
All right, I'll throw another anecdote back at you because I think I heard a story. Correct me if I'm wrong, where it might have been Morocco, where you had the bikes didn't arrive to a TA in time, and you needed to borrow or buy local bikes, and it kind of sounded like the wheels literally came off of your not from anything your team did, but kind of race logistics. Did that happen to you, or am I totally making this up from another story I heard?
Um, we've had some close calls in that situation where um, when Primal Quest Utah was one, but thankfully my wife was one of the support people, and she insisted to Michael Tobin's wife, who was one of the other two support, I think, that no, they needed to go even because we could get there to this transition sooner than they think, which we did, and thankfully my wife and the team got there 5-10 minutes before, so um, it was kind of a rush in their situation. I honestly have to say, I think most all the time the logistics and the support teams when we did have them were not any cause for lack of performance or result. But that particular situation, I think, was the one when Ian and John Howard and I think Robin Benacasa and
Mm,
um, the other guy's name were doing the rig. Well, I think it was a 5-person team at the time.
mm.
Oh, actually, yes, it was the race in the pole that we were in, but I was racing on the U.S. team.
Ah.
And anyway, that was with Rebecca Rush and Marsha Ulrich and another team member I raced once with, who I forgot to mention, and I'm sorry, is Isaac Wilson. So we were on the team together. Um, and actually, who's the other one? Our navigator, a Utah boy, or excuse me, an Idaho boy. Anyway, um, Ian's team, their bikes weren't there. They ended up renting some bikes and they were clunkers, right? And it was mostly flat, sandy dirt roads. So they weren't a huge um, factor in how the race played out. But yeah, that was a situation that I'm sure it's happened to many others. And yeah, I can just go on stories after stories about how close races ended up at times with us because we got a little lazy or um, what do you call it? When you're non-complacent isn't the word, but anyway, where you all of a sudden you realize like, oh my God, they're second place and they're going to do this transition faster than us, and we got to get our shit together so we can get on the road here and win this thing. But oh yeah, too many
I,
close calls.
I think the anecdote was heading towards when you face a scenario or a situation that's uh, kind of throws your whole race off and is out of your control. Um, and like, how do you regroup from that? Like, I guess my adventure racing sometimes feels very silly. We're trying to make a
Oh
sport
yeah.
out of an adventure, and like rules can sometimes feel arbitrary or unnecessary or weird. Sometimes
Sure.
there's no rule for a certain situation. It's never occurred before. No one's ever thought it up before because life happens. But how do you regroup competitively from when your camel bites you or something like something that's completely ridiculous and outside the realm of game planning for a race.
Yeah, uh, always a challenge, right? But I think it really comes down to your desire to win or your drive of your team as a whole. And I again, it goes back to the team being very competitive in nature in itself. But a lot of times it would take somebody to say, hey, you know what, this isn't over. We can still win this thing. Look, we've got this leg ahead, or we're only this far behind, and we're faster, stronger, better, smarter, more experienced, whatever you want to tell yourself. But it really does come down to like, okay, pull up the bootstraps and let's go, and let's really put our best foot forward and all of our energy in the right direction. And so many times, it's when you make a navigational mistake. I'm sure anybody on this conversation can recall when the team has made a mistake navigating, and all of a sudden you realize that you probably lost the lead or your position you're in, and you've now got to backtrack, uh, however far it might be in whatever length of race, and it's going to cost you this much time. And it's like all hope's lost, you think, and then you got to say to yourself, hell no, we still got a chance. They can make a mistake. There's this ahead, anything can really happen. And so, yeah, I so many times, again, I go back to thinking, okay, we got this in the bag, and all of a sudden we're sprinting for the finish. And even in sprinting in a world championships like we did in Canada or Newfoundland, it's just insanity sometimes. So stressful.
So I've got like three more questions. Can I keep you for another 10 minutes?
You can, for sure, as
All
long
right.
as your other fellow and ladies and gents on the call are happy to. I'm happy to.
Well, we'll give them a chance to voice in if they have any other questions in a few minutes. I just have three more I wanted to get to. The other big question I had in my mind was just like how big of a factor do you think competitiveness is in adventure racing? I mean, versus skills, teamwork. I know competitiveness is an aspect of that, but just the sheer fact of like a team being focused on the win or on the ranking, or even just the drive to be the best the team can be. How big of a factor is that versus just taking it easy, going out there and doing the best that a team can without really worrying about the competitive aspect of the sport?
Good question. And there's a few different things I can throw in, but I'll try to do as briefly as I can. One, I get this question a lot about teams asking, how do I pick my team members? What do I look for in them? And what are the most important components of it? And I honestly think the most important part of that whole team composition is compatibility and similar goals up front, understanding that, hey, if you want to be a winning team, are you capable of being a winning team? Or you want to just be a team that's going to experience a few events or an event and work up from there, see how the team meshes as personalities and abilities. That's a huge factor in, I think, the results. And results are all relative too to what your goals are. And I always tell people, pick realistic goals. I can tell you the first adventure race I did was the Malibu qualifier and that's where that race was. And when I stumbled anyway, back in the day, it wasn't that race, but it was in that location. I remember we wanted to qualify for the Eco Challenge, and Rebecca Rush's team had a team there, and so forth. And I think we finished second. They were taking the top three teams to Eco Challenge in Australia, and we qualified and we go into Australia. I thought we had a pretty solid team, which we did, but I had lofty goals beyond realistic goals, and I thought we could podium. I think we ended up like 19th or something like that. We were one of the top 3 or 5 American teams, but we had some issues with feet, just horrible feet damage on 2 of our team members early on because of the gear recommendations that the organizers suggested. But anyway, that one was totally unrealistic in my mind. I thought we could do it much better. So anyway, I learned from that. We went back the next year. We changed out one team member, but regardless, that was just various situations that played into that. But anyway, we came back and we won the next year, the Morocco Eco Challenge. And that was so much to do with training preparation, looking back at our mistakes and our shortcomings and what we needed to become a stronger team and potentially end up on the podium. And that was just hard work, dedication, a lot of effort, and a lot of training, specifically towards the events that we're going to be racing in, or the disciplines we'd be racing in that Eco Challenge. But again, yeah, your mind has to be a big part of it too, you know. And if all the members on the team have that same goal, or at least believe they can, I think it makes a huge difference. And that's why, you know, selecting a team just to go out and experience it, to really um, get their feet wet, so to say, and learn what it's really about. Because until you do, it's just hard to really um, understand what it's all about. You know, you may see it and view it on television or talk to people about it, but it's a whole different game when you're out there participating or doing it.
Okay, I'm going to combine this question into three parts. What is your competitive advice or advice on competition or being competitive to a team that's just starting out in adventure racing, a kind of mid-pack experienced team that's kind of working its way up, and then like a top flight team? Like if you had one word of advice to each of those groups of racers.
Um, I'll say first off, I think a lot of it goes back to what we were just, you know, what I was just talking about. But let's say you pick a beginning team. Um, I would say first of all, pick a race that's achievable. So don't go jumping in, which we saw in Eco Challenge Fiji for say a number of teams that were just way over their head, out of their league, um, racing it or participating in a race like that. Pick a smaller race, more doable. Even, you know, I don't know how many short sprint races there are anymore, but some of the shorter 8 hour or 24-hour events are a great start. And then realize that, you know, realize that you're likely not going to be a top team, even if you've got some of the best athletes in the world in sports like this. Although the Canadian team proved us wrong there with the gal. She just was mind blowing. I can't remember her name, but petite
It's Rhea.
um, Freya, yeah, petite athlete in the obstacle sport world, but man, talented. I mean, she was over the top impressive. But anyway, that would be my advice for a beginning team. Now, more experienced but novice team, um, evaluate where you are with your team composition going into it, and if this is the team you're not say stuck with, but the team that you've got to work with. Look at the team as a whole, strengths and weaknesses. How good your navigator? How strong are you as athletes? Where have you placed in events before? And pick a realistic goal to improve on or try to achieve. Right. Um, I think it always helps to, and this I've seen in individual athletes in all different sports. You know, they get these lofty goals, but they may not be so realistic. And you gotta have some victories to build up confidence. So the victory might be as small as, hey, we're shooting for a top 10 in the co-ed division or the men's division or what have it. Pick realistic goals, get some victories in your pocket, and then build from those. Um, and then believe the other part of it was as a top competitive team that may have maybe ranked in the top 10 or something in the series or what have it. Um, I think about a team like who I've supported and got to know a lot of the athletes, followed up in, where was it, in Alaska, is the Columbia Vita. You know, super strong team, very talented, very competitive. And so many times they've been close in the world championships and just haven't pulled it off to my recollection. I believe they won a number of World Cup events or World Series events, but not the big one. Um, Sometimes it comes down to luck, and other times it comes down to just the level of competition you're up against and experience. And when you're talking about Nathan and his team with Chris Foyne, I mean, those guys were pretty much unbeatable at the world championship level when they had their A game. Um, and then there's, you know, obviously, was it the Swedish Armed Forces who won this last year, last 2 out of 3 years, maybe? Another super strong team with great skills, navigation, and otherwise, and some great results. So if Vitorade and John Onder and Urtzi and these guys, Marco, stick with it, um, I think they can. I think they can achieve it, but they're going to have um, the cards fall in their favor because it's that top two or three or four or five teams. It's become very competitive, and a lot of times, as we know in the sport, team members will jump around, and you can pick up some talent, like in most sports, whether it's cycling or ball sports. Everybody's out for the best team they can build. So it does change around a little bit, but again, as I was mentioning, I think in their situation, it's going to require chips falling their way. To
All right. My last question, and you've segued perfectly. Has the competitiveness or that aspect of the sport changed since when you were in your heyday and now? Do you think it's different at all?
uh, during our heyday or my prime years in it, I was very fortunate, as our team was, and all the other top teams in the sport. There was some money in it, whether it's prize money or sponsorship money or um, whatever, monies from the organizers or whatever. There was more money in it, so we could justify our passion a little more with our families and our work environment and so forth. But has it changed in the competitive level? I think it's probably pretty similar um, in a lot of ways. If you looked at number of top teams that are teams that could potentially win an event, I think it's quite similar. But it, I think that the competitors that are in it now, that have been in it for a long time, they have a real deep passion for suffering and um, adventure and success. I mean, look at, again, like I was saying with Gatorade, how long have they been around? I think Nathan is finally um, actually retired. I could be wrong. I saw Chris was racing with another team, which I was impressed because Chris Horn is so talented in so many different ways. For him to go out there and just kind of race alongside and mentor his team members, I thought that was very commendable and respect them at all levels on that one. But yeah, I think it's kind of come down now, the sport, to those that are very dedicated, passionate, and what do you want to say? Um, have a love for travel, adventure, and competition, right? Because face it, I don't know how many times I've laid down in bed or out camping or something thinking, I'm so glad I'm not doing this on 2 hours of sleep or doing some active crazy adventure on 2 hours of sleep and in 5 or 6 days in. It's uh, talk about hard on the body, and I've got the utmost respect for everybody out there at whatever level it is, and I appreciate and um, I'm glad to be still a player in it in some capacity, whether it's on the Adventure Racing World Series board or as a manufacturer, um, pumping gear out and helping, with the sport, help the sport evolve with quality gear, and then seeing what's happened with Michael in this movie. I think it's going to be huge for the sport. We'll see how it plays out in the long run, but I think for several years we're going to see a spike, an increase in interest because of that, and we'll see how it grows from there.
Awesome. Well, I can't thank you enough for staying involved in the sport, and not just you, but so many of the names you named are still involved, and you can still chat with them at a race. And it's one of the coolest parts of our sport is, our heroes are also our if not teammates, then are lining up next to us, and or are standing on the sidelines, or yeah. So, or we get to talk with them on a Zoom call. So thank you so much. Are there any questions out there? Anyone want to chime in? You can unmute yourself and just launch question away.
Is that Emily? I see her. Oh, she's a clap. I thought she was raising her hand.
You're getting applause. That's the way we
Thank
applaud
you,
now in webinars.
Heather, Emily.
Okay.
And I will say, I'll just add real quickly.
Yeah.
One of the big things for me with my business, I think of anything that I can have pride in is my desire to be reachable, or uh, if if anybody has a question, whether it's about the sport or my products, I want to have that customer service reputation, because it's not just something I feel is good for my business, but I think deep down inside, I love sharing information and knowledge to anybody that's passionate, as I think most of us on this call are, with sport of adventure racing and just general outdoor life and activities. Don't hesitate to reach me. You can do so through our website at Out There USA product, or OutThereUSA.com, and my number's on the site. My email's there, so fire away if you so desire.
Yeah. And it looks like we have a question, but right before that, I mean, the reason we got to know each other is because I emailed you about your backpack and trying to get some specs on it. And we were on a road trip through Colorado at the time. You said, well, just come on by. I'll meet you outside my garage. And you opened up your garage, and I think we bought 2 packs right out of your garage in Vail. So
Yeah,
that's how we got to know each other originally. So yeah, I would say you're pretty accessible. But we have a question. Yeah, go ahead. Wild style.
Hi. I was just wondering what your guys' thoughts were on how GP, starting the races with GPS that are coming out, and how that's going to impact the competitiveness,
um,
or making it more open to non-competitiveness, maybe. I don't know.
yeah, it's Catherine, is that right? Catherine.
Patty,
Oh, I'm sorry, I'm looking at the wrong one.
that's okay.
Hi, Patty.
Okay.
I think I got a couple comments I'll throw out on that one. First of all, I think it's critical. I was literally just earlier today, something came up on my Outside Plus thing about a guy who's been dropped in the woods, one of their personalities or whatever, and has to find his way back to his vehicle or home or the base or whatever. And that one's all about map and compass. And obviously the sport, I think it was birthed with um, that being the only means of navigation. Because I don't think back 25 years ago there were reliable GPSs and ones that you could track yourself with and so forth. But I think it's critical, or maybe not critical, but I think it's essential that um, these races still utilize maps. Uh, I recall, just because it's kind of the or um, discipline in the sport itself. I'd say if you can't find your way, you're not going to get to the finish, regardless of how strong or fast you are. Um, so efficiency is obviously important in skills, and I can say a couple of quick things on that. The skills of map reading. I was very much a novice, and still am very much a learning student of navigation with map and compass. And when you get out in wilderness or areas where you aren't familiar with the lay of land, per se. Um, Story back to Eco Challenge racing against John Howard, and who was one of the best at the time with the navigation map and compass. And I guess it was the Eco Challenge. I was with Isaac Wilson. We had to swim across in the South China Sea. 2 team members were in a boat. 2 team members swam across this bay, and we got to an island. We had to meet up, go to a checkpoint, and then meet back at the boats. Well, John Howard navigated incorrectly on the island, or not so efficiently, and we came in on the other side and beat them to the checkpoint and back to the transition area. And I'm thinking, here's one of the best guys in the world at this sport in navigation, and he's making mistakes. And I've seen Chris Foran, one of the very best, make mistakes. I've made my share and then some. It's so easy to do when you just let your attention slip a little bit. But on the other side of that, you get somebody like Chris Foran, who who can navigate through the darkest of night and the ruggedest, most rugged terrain you can imagine, and find like this kite tucked away in some little crevasse or rock nook or something, under a tree or wherever it might be. Just incredible at times when you see the skill of that. But we go back to the GPS and what role it's going to play in the adventure racing world. When you have the ability to track yourself, which I don't recall if we did when we did the World Championships down in Argentina. We ended up winning that one, but I remember early on we're in the bamboo section, and we had both devices. We had the mapping compass and we had the GPS, but we weren't utilizing the what do you want to call it? The nature of the devices or the tools we had to intersect where we didn't make a mistake. And we ended up, had we been following both, we could have done so without error, right? We could have navigated through that section without error. And it's a learning thing. And, but I'm guessing that like if you're using Gaia or one of your tracking devices, you can find where you are spot on, but you often have to compare it then to a map, because I guess we would plot the courses, the TAs and so forth or checkpoints on the GPS, but if you couldn't follow those specifically, and maybe they do allow that now, you had to still correlate it with a map. So it's still a skill for sure, but it's certainly much easier with the GPS. And whether it's going to change the sport as a whole, hopefully they don't allow it as blanket apparatus throughout the sport.
Just to give my 2 cents really quick. So I applaud Mark Harris from the Shenandoah Epic, who's opened his race to GPS this year. I agree that it grates on me a little bit as a traditionalist, but I'm curious to see how his experiment goes with drawing people in. I mean, that race has always been super popular, and it looks like it's filling up again this year. So I don't think it's having an impact on his registration numbers. I think it's a nice experiment to see what types of people it attracts to the sport, whether that's the navigation element is an impediment to people signing up. I'm open to seeing more events try it out. At the same time, I think adventure racing does not have race referees every 50 feet on the course. Like if you wanted to use a GPS now, you could probably get away with it. Our team has never done that. We like being, rule abiding, and we don't do that. I don't know of any teams that do. A lot of people at the pointy end of races say using a GPS might slow them down. And at the other end, I mean, if you study the history of the sport, GPS has been used in the World Championship before in certain sections. There was a section in the 2014 race in Ecuador, I think, where they used GPS. It's not like it's a foreign thing to adventure racing, but it's something that I think we'll see how Mark and other races implement it and see how it goes and kind of study it. So I'm more of a wait and see type of guy on this, even though I probably won't use it myself, mainly because I'm not that technologically apt, nor am I the navigator. So not really my problem. But yeah, I'm curious to see how it plays out. Are there any other questions out there?
Can I just throw one tidbit in on that? The big challenge there is too with all these navigation apps that you can have on your phone. Probably very difficult to monitor if somebody wants to, utilize something like that in an unfair way, or a way that's going to give them an unfair advantage. They probably could get away with it pretty easily, unless they're not allowed to have these devices with them, which then means you can't have a camera, which a lot of times people want to document their event. So yeah, I guess it's up to the individual and the race organizer to see how they can control that. And I haven't even really thought about that since Eco Challenge, that you know, that could be a big factor in how the races are set up and how they're played out. You know, if there are people or individuals or teams that want to, you know, use that advantage that's not legal.
Yeah, I've never seen it done, but even an eco challenge, I mean, when we did it in Fiji, I don't think they checked our backpacks when we started. Like, I don't think there was any like clean out your backpacks type of move. I mean, I don't think you would want to be the team that got disqualified for using a GPS in eco challenge. That would be pretty bad. But yeah, I think you know, from what I've heard, a lot of top racers say using a GPS might slow a Chris Foran down. So maybe it's not useful. I don't know. Any other questions out there? All right, I'll let Mike go. Mike, thank you so much. I think you should be proud of me for getting through this entire webinar on competitiveness without using your nickname. I think I heard your nickname was Cannibal. So maybe I didn't
That was
the whole webinar.
that was mountain biking days. Eddie Merckx, yeah, that one. I let's put it this way: back in the day when I was mountain bike racing, I was racing to provide for my family, and when I win a race or how I finished in a race, um, obviously reflected on prize money and bonuses and everything else. And so some of the competitors in Europe were always questioning why I always felt like I needed to race at the front of the race. And, honestly, it was a need to survive or provide, I guess I might say.
Perfect. Great ending. Well, thank you again, Mike. Really appreciate
Thanks,
your time and willingness to join us and share your insight. And thanks to everyone who joined us. And hopefully we'll see everyone soon at, if not the main summer adventure race, then another adventure race somewhere in the US or the world. So thanks to everyone. Mike, enjoy the rest of your ski season out there, and hopefully we'll get some people out on a bike trip with you soon.
No, that'd be great. And Cliff, thank you for the invitation and on all of those that listened in and shared in this experience.
Thank you both.
Thanks. Good night, everyone.
Good night, you guys.